Forced into a loveless marriage at 13, Queen Caroline of Denmark began an affair with her husband's closest friend. Caroline didn't know it, but she was digging her own grave, and her tragic end is proof. Her Royal Highness Princess Caroline Matilda knew all about big families. She was the youngest of 9 siblings. Sadly, by the time Caroline Matilda came screaming into the palace, a full family was not around to greet her. Only a few months before her birth, Caroline Matilda's father succumbed to a long injury and took his final labored breaths. While losing a father is hard enough for any family, it's even a bigger deal for a royal brood. Caroline's dad was the first person in line for the British throne, meaning that when he kicked the bucket, Caroline's big brother inched closer to the crown. And with his rising power, Caroline's sway rose too. It's no secret that back in the olden days, people used to get married at very young ages. But how young is too young? Caroline Matilda, born in 1751, was betrothed to her future husband at the tender age of 13. It's a lot less creepy when you realize that Caroline's soon-to-be spouse, the Crown Prince of Denmark, had just celebrated his 16th birthday, but still, too soon. Blind dates can be fun, but what about blind weddings? By the time Caroline Matilda set sail for the Danish capital of Copenhagen, she hadn't yet met her betrothed, and there was another plot twist just around the corner. By the time Caroline arrived in Copenhagen, she wasn't marrying a prince anymore. Christian's father had just passed, meaning that Caroline's new husband was now the King of Denmark. What young girl doesn't dream of marrying a dashing young prince who can whisk them away to a kingdom far, far away? Well, Caroline Matilda lived that dream, with a twist. Instead of a romantic courtship, Caroline didn't actually meet her husband until just before their wedding. When that time came, she learned that Christian was not what she had expected. King Christian VII suffered from mental illness early on in his life, and modern scholars believe that he was schizophrenic. The Danish court hastily arranged his marriage to Caroline Matilda because they believed that a wife would improve his mental condition. How romantic. The more Caroline got to know her Prince Charming, the more he appeared less and less, charming. In the summer before Caroline Matilda arrived in Copenhagen, Christian VII had already started a love affair. That's right, by the time this prince had been engaged to his princess, he already had a fling going on the side, and he was just getting started. As if it wasn't bad enough that Christian VII broke his wedding vows to Caroline Matilda before she even walked up the aisle, he continued breaking them long after he tied the knot too. The Danish king had a habit of frequenting the courtesans around Copenhagen. Arranged marriages, particularly those where the couple only meets days before their wedding, are dicey affairs, though what-ifs are endless. Unfortunately for King Christian VII and Queen Caroline Matilda, their union went about as well as you'd expect. The king was deeply uninterested in his bride and treated her coolly even in the early days of their relationship. Christian wasn't the only one who treated Caroline like trash. All of Denmark seemed to join the anti-Caroline brigade. The new queen's courtiers and the Danish public considered her too plump to be beautiful. Apparently, her appearance was so bland that other women weren't even jealous of her despite her wealth and her status as queen. Ouch. Christian VII did not bother to hide his complete lack of interest in Caroline, so it didn't take long for the Danish court to start wondering what was behind the icy treatment. Over time, the rumor mill spun so intensely that many people started to believe that Christian VII was gay. Obviously, this wasn't true, but it shows you just how much he hated Caroline. Eventually, the royal couple consummated their marriage either out of a sense of royal duty or simply to get their handlers off their backs. Whatever finally brought them together, their one hookup luckily bore fruit. Caroline Matilda became a mother at the age of just 17 when she gave birth to the Crown Prince Frederick. By all accounts, she was a loving and doting mother. She often went for walks with her son through the Danish capital, even though royals only rode around in carriages. However, there was a darker reason Caroline kept leaving the castle, despite the outcry it caused. European royal courts can be utterly brutal places, and Queen Caroline learned this the hard way. She found herself powerless in the Danish court despite, being queen. She was helpless to do anything when her husband's courtier had her best friend, Louise von Plessen, exiled. Caroline felt even more alone than ever, so when her husband went on a summer vacation, she finally lashed out. At the end of his royal vacation, King Christian VII brought back a special souvenir: the German physician and philosopher Johann Friedrich Struensee. He became the king's official royal physician because he was good at dealing with the king's mental issues. In the long run, however, it would be Caroline Matilda who benefited most from Struensee's arrival. Those 18th century physicians and courtiers were no good at treating mental illness, but they knew a thing or two about physical illness. Shortly after her 18th birthday, Caroline Matilda got a spell of dropsy. Struensee, acting as the royal physician, cured the queen by suggesting entertainment and exercise, and his position in Caroline's eyes would only get better from there. Smallpox was, for a long time, the scourge of the pre-vaccination world. Not even royals were safe from the terrible virus. 6 reigning monarchs would succumb to smallpox. You can imagine Caroline Matilda's relief then, when Struensee successfully inoculated her infant child, Crown Prince Frederick, against the disease. Caroline Matilda began to think favorably of Struensee. The man did improve her relationship with her husband, cure her dropsy, and inoculate her son against smallpox. Apparently, the two became very friendly, and their friendship amused the king, so Christian VII gave Struensee his own rooms at the palace. He would later come to regret this decision. There were only rumors that Caroline Matilda had carried on an affair with the actor Latour, but it is fact that she carried on an affair with another man. Caroline Matilda and Struensee became romantically involved in the spring of 1770, less than 2 years after Struensee had arrived in Copenhagen. According to some courtiers, the two had actually been romantic since 1769, and they weren't shy about their affair. Royal tours were opportunities for the public to get to know the royal family, or at least to see them waving from a carriage. The Danish people of the border provinces were surprised then when, on a tour with her husband the king, they observed Caroline Matilda acting very, very affectionately with Struensee. Rumors of the couple's affair were now widespread. Oh, the palace intrigue. Caroline Matilda and Struensee must have been feeling particularly powerful after returning from their scandalous tour. Using their newfound influence with the infirm king, the queen and Struensee had courtier Conrad Holck and other political enemies booted from the palace. Caroline Matilda and Struensee worked together to have the Danish court chancellor dismissed from office. After the chancellor's dismissal, the power and influence of the queen consort and her love interest only grew. In court, Struensee announced that his orders would have the same effect as if the king had signed them himself. Historians dispute who, between Caroline Matilda and Struensee, wielded more influence, but more than likely it was the queen. Struensee and Caroline Matilda wasted no time exercising their unlimited authority. Between March of 1771 and January of 1772, Struensee issued upwards of 3 orders a day, angering the conservative factors throughout Norway and Denmark. Caroline Matilda shared in Struensee's unpopularity as she supported his reforms, and they continued flaunting their affair. The Danish court summered at the Hirschholm Palace, where Caroline Matilda and Struensee spent plenty of romantic time together. After the summer, Caroline Matilda gave birth to a daughter, and it didn't take long for the rumors to start flying. The courtiers whispered, rather loudly, that the new baby was in fact Struensee's. Some courtiers even referred to the newborn as La Petite Struensee. After the birth of her second child, with the rumors of the child's parentage in question, the court intrigue reached new heights. Rumors began spreading that the Queen Consort and Struensee were plotting to imprison King Christian VII. This is highly unlikely, however, given that the king and his favor for the couple were their only protection from other courtiers. Apparently, when tensions in the Danish court reached their highest point, Struensee became terrified that he would soon lose his life. In a panic, he rushed to the bedchambers of his queen consort and fell to her feet, pleading her to let him leave Denmark. If this story is true, Caroline Matilda would have regretted ordering Struensee to stay. Fake news isn't just a 21st century problem. Even 300 years ago, fake news ran wild. King Christian VII's stepmother, the Queen Dowager Juliana Maria, received false evidence from a two-timing courtier that Caroline Matilda and Struensee were plotting to overthrow her stepson. Fake or not, the evidence prompted Juliana Marie to act. The rich don't go broke like the rest of us, and royals don't go to prison like the rest of us. Juliana Maria had Caroline Matilda arrested in January of 1772 and imprisoned her in an actual castle. But even in her palatial cell, Caroline Matilda couldn't escape the court. The worst part of her ordeal was being accompanied by a bunch of courtiers who hated her. Meanwhile, Caroline's lover Struensee didn't get off so easy. Caroline Matilda and Struensee had openly flaunted their affair, but when things got messy, they denied everything. Finally, after some questionable interrogation techniques, the couple confessed to their romance. The Church of Denmark promptly dissolved the marriage between Caroline Matilda and Christian VII. Mercifully, they also absolved Caroline Matilda of any moral wrongdoing, possibly because her husband had been with every courtesan in Copenhagen. The worst thing to happen to Caroline Matilda following was that the Church of Denmark banned her name during church services. Struensee, on the other hand, faced a far darker fate. The Danish court sentenced the disgraced royal physician to the guillotine. Caroline Matilda wasn't just married to a king, she was the sister of one too. King George III of Great Britain reacted strongly to the news of his sister's arrest. Danish authorities had considered banishing Struensee and his allies, including Caroline Matilda, to the hinterlands of Jutland. But George III objected. He threatened military action, going so far as to launch a squadron if the Danes treated his sister harshly. Thankfully, the Danes relented. Caroline Matilda continued dabbling in court intrigue even when she was in exile. She became the centerpiece of a plot to overthrow the government in Denmark and crown her as regent. The plot even had the support of Caroline's very powerful brother, King George III. It seemed like everything was in place to pull off the coup, until it all crumbled. Just as the would-be usurpers were making the final arrangements for their power grab, they received a piece of news that derailed their plans. The woman at the centerpiece of their scheme, Caroline Matilda, had suddenly perished of scarlet fever. At the time of her death, Queen Caroline was only 23 years old. Despite her short time on Earth, she crammed in more drama than anyone. Thanks for watching History Expose. If you love uncovering the best stories in history, hit like and subscribe to keep exploring with us. Don't forget to visit our main page, Factinate, for more incredible facts about everything.